Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to PYA's Summer CPE Symposium, Hot Topics in Healthcare, Day 2. As this event is for CPE credit, there are some additional steps that we'll take in order to comply with NASBA's requests. In accordance with NASBA, attendees will be provided 3 polling questions throughout today's presentations. Responses are documented electronically. Attendees must respond to these polling questions within the allotted time in order to receive CPE credit for the presentation. If you encounter any issues responding to the polls, please send your answer in the Q&A pane, and we will document them for your CPE credit. A post-event survey will also be provided for attendees to submit feedback regarding their webinar experience. The polling questions and post-event survey must be submitted for proof of participation today. Credits will only be earned for sessions attended in their entirety. We've posted a PDF copy of the presentation slides for your reference in the Resources pane. Also, you'll receive an email later today with a copy of the slides and a recording of the webinar. You can customize your viewing experience by resizing, moving, or minimizing all of the panes within the webinar.net platform. Your CPE certificates are downloadable via the CPE pane once you've completed the requirements and are also sent via email after the webinar. You'll have the opportunity to submit questions to today's presenter by typing a message into the Q&A pane of the control panel. We'll collect these and address them via email after the webinar, and all the presentations will be recorded and released with a copy of the slides after the event. Our final presentation is After the Breach, Navigating the Fallout of Healthcare Data Compromises, presented by Barry Mathis. With that, I'll hand it over to Barry.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here virtually with everyone. And yes, that is a hotel room in my background. I'm this morning on some third-party vendor management topics, and it's funny how these things kind of intertwine because if you look at the breaches that are occurring today, they're coming from a lot of third-party vendors, unfortunately. Before we get started, I want to say a thing about this summer of this part of our firm. I love this initiative. At the core of PYA, we have an approach to help, right? It's a help culture. And no better way, I think, than we can help them produce the kind of thought leadership and insightful information free for you, right? It does cost to produce it. There's a lot of people going on in the background. This is a lot like a television production in some cases, that many people come together doing a great job to present something of high quality and high content to those who participate. And I just want to say thank you to those folks. And it is one of the jewels in the crown at PYA is this help culture, putting this out there. And the fact that you get CPEs for it is all the better. So moving into today's topic, a little bit about me. My background is a software programmer, if you may use an old term, turned data systems security person, then CIO for a number of years, then into healthcare compliance as an IT audit director under a separate engagement with Ascension Health for the entire organization. A lot of CIO, CTO, compliance officer type work. All that to say, I've been doing this for a very long time. And if you look at my career and the things that I share with you, the vast majority of it is my interaction with clients going through this or friends going through this, or collecting those either as part of an engagement where we've been able to help either in mitigation or planning for these, and then resharing those with groups like you to extend the network, and then you then extend your network, and we all get better at what we're doing. So I enjoy that part of my job. I enjoy sitting down, especially face to face. In this case, it's virtual, and working through some of these challenges and sharing ideas and thoughts, and continuously learning from you and then sharing that with others. So I want to thank you for that as well. So let's talk about what happens after. Most of us have been inundated over the last few years of the fact that it's not if you get a breach, it's when you get a breach. And, unfortunately, some of you have already experienced that. And, you have my empathy from that case as somebody who works in this space. I have of a cyber attack, and in some cases at my own doing because I'm trying to learn more about it. So therefore, I put myself in certain situations so I can collect information and then share that with you in hopes that you don't have to go through that. And in some cases, just purely because I'm a human being like everybody else that had a scanner on it, and lo and behold, I bought somebody a couple $100 pair of tennis shoes that I never got to see or wear. So I'm part of the culture as a victim of that, as well as an advisor on how to prevent and navigate through that. Today, we're going to talk about what happens. For those of you who have been through a breach, this may be an opportunity to say, hey, check things off. We kind of did the same things that Barry's talking about. For those of you who have been fortunate enough that you've not gone through a breach yet, then this may give you some insight into how to prepare for what to expect when you go through. So we're gonna share some stories along the way, and also hopefully get some questions from you that we can respond to. But again, lifelong learners, this is all part of it. So after a so we're going to back up just a minute. That in the event that you have a breach, you have implemented your incident response plan, right? And you are either turn off or blow the video, or you're cutting out a bit. So give me here. It sounds like I'm cutting out. I am in the hotel using their Wi-Fi, so that is quite possible. You see, and maybe turn off the blur. Would that do it? Let's see. That means you're going to see my hotel room. There you go. Turn that off. Matthew, does that help? Give me by turning off the blur. We'll go for that for a minute. If not, I'll turn it off completely. But we're hoping that in the event that you've had a breach, that you've at least had your incident response plan in place and you've been able to go through that. If not, we're going to talk about some things plan. But certainly the stages that we typically talk about in the event of a breach are containment, eradication, and recovery. On the containment side, it's the immediate actions that probably matter the most. That's the reason a very good, robust plan, incident response plan, is necessary. Looks like I'm getting another message from our facilitator here. So you want me to turn it completely off. Let's see if this helps. There, now I'm a big giant. Give me a thumbs up, Matthew, if that's going to help at all. So back to your regularly scheduled program. The immediate action is sometimes a difference between a major incident and a less major incident. The reason I all out of a breach, and I don't know that there's ever really a minor incident these days once you actually have a breach, with just all the things you have to do to essentially recover from that. Okay. So, but the immediate actions, and I've seen everything from, and I'll share a couple of stories, almost overstepping in that to where the immediate action was to send out notices that we've had a breach, and unnecessarily, because they didn't actually have a breach. They hadn't gone through all the steps and the diligence, and it turns out they didn't have a breach, but they did have an occurred. I've even seen some folks who take some immediate, very basic action, and that is the CIO literally running down to the data center and disconnecting the facility away from the rest of the world, knowing that things were getting worse. Contain it, but it was an old school, right? Just pull the plug. Likely not something you can do in a health system or a hospital, but there's virtual versions of that you certainly can do. So getting disconnected from the rest of the network, we talk about something in the technical field in the audit as horizontal. a bad actor, once they get into the organization, being able to move horizontally within the organization. Um, there's a term that I want you to get used to. It's one that you should hear more about going forward, and that is zero trust. So the whole industry, not just in healthcare, but other critical infrastructure for our country, are moving towards zero trust environments. Now, what exactly is a zero trust environment? Today, or back in the day, and maybe currently for some of you, once you authenticate, however you're doing, once you authenticate into your environment, then your system knows who you are, and you can navigate through that. And you could likely step away from the computer, and with the exception of some basic things like your screen may lock, or maybe there's a 5-minute log out or something like that. There's embedded may force you to log back in, so to speak. In a zero trust environment, it's looking for a lot of other factors as well, where you're logging in from, right? What you're doing across the network. And it is continuously asking you to re authenticate activity, or maybe even a change. Like, 5 minutes ago, you logged in from the hotel, now you're logging in from the restaurant. Even though you've already credentialed, maybe you're still logged in, it's going to make you re-credential to get back in. So it is continuously asking you to prove who you are. Um, so we got Hannah. Hi, Lori, and here from support. I'm getting messages in my chat there, trying to take care of that. So, um, Matthew, give me a thumbs up if the issue is mine or not. If we're still having issues with me, if I have to, I can jump over to another call. I want you guys to be able to hear the content. Um, but there may be opportunities to either check to see if you're doing zero trust. Ask the question of your IT folks; they'll know what that means. But a zero trust environment is necessary, I think, going forward. It doesn't happen overnight. Zero trust, by the way, is not a tool; it's not a product. So that's something. It's a mindset. It's how you work. Um, it says we're losing my audio. Guys, give me just a second here. If you need to get a drink of water, something like that, I'm going to make a change on my network connectivity, and jump over to something. It's nice being your own IT support. So let me do this real quick.
Hello, everyone. While we wait for Barry to return, let's do polling question 1. Our first question is, what is typically the first step of a healthcare organization should take immediately after discovering a cyber breach? Notify patients via social media, shut down all hospital operations, activate the incident response plan, call the media, or change all employee passwords. Remember, you must fill out the polling questions to receive CPE credit. You will have 30 seconds to answer.
All right. Matthew, are we back? Just a text on the phone is going to be faster than the system there. It's a huge delay in the text.
We are back. Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right. So just for a test here, real quick, since I now have improved the technology on my end, let's see if we can go back. Is that still okay with the video there?
Looks good so far. Take it away.
All right, good deal. So it sounds like you guys went through the polling question. Well, I hope you got the answer right. Kicking off that incident response plan, as we mentioned, is extremely important. And as you build that plan out, there's some communication things that you want to make sure you've got in terms of cross, and we'll talk that towards the end in terms of how you're sharing information, the transparency with that. It's not an IT thing, it's not a clinical thing, it's not an administrative thing. There's a whole team of folks that have to come together for that incident response plan. But in terms of containment, again, zero trust, we talked about that. We'll fast forward just a little bit. Besides the containment, we're trying to stop that lateral movement in the organization, so that maybe this particular service or this particular device may get taken out, but we're not going to see the entire organization go down. One of the clearest examples of that, and you're going to remember this when I say this, you're going to say, "Oh, you're not kidding," and that was Change Healthcare, right? So what happened there was there a lot of horizontal movement once a server that was lacking some multi-factor was impacted, it moved horizontally through the organization, and the whole house of cards came down. Of course, that started a whole new conversation around all your eggs in one basket, and the whole industry's kind of gotten better over that. So it's unfortunate that Change Healthcare had to go through what they did. It was a lot of money, but I think there were things that come out of that that's actually made our industry better because of that. And it's again unfortunate that they had to take the brunt of that. But learning from that is something that has helped the rest of us. The next phase, kind of after the breach, is the eradication piece. And in most cases, I'm not saying all, but I'd say probably 90% of the cases I've worked in the last couple of years, your cyber insurance company has a say in this. Okay. So one of the things you're going to want to do, when you get done listening to this, is go ask the question, what are our requirements under our cyber insurance underwriting for notifying them in the event that we have a breach? And in some cases, it may be even if you think you've had a breach, not notifying them could create a situation where you have no claim, or they're going to deny a claim, or certainly reduce a claim towards the end. So, but in the instance where the insurance company does come in, they typically have a short list of vendor partners that they're going to bring in to help do the eradication. So if they are not, if you're a large healthcare organization listening to me on this webcast, you may have a team that's already practiced and experienced in the eradication piece, but it's more than simply that one device. So part of the eradication, you want to get rid of the malware if there's malware involved. In some cases, it's ransomware, and getting rid of it's not really an option. It's a matter of kind of rebuilding, and we'll talk about that in the recovery. But you want to make sure that there's not any traces. One of the tactics of bad actors is, if I can infiltrate your organization, once I'm in the door, I'm not going to immediately attack and load ransomware. If I'm unnoticed and you don't know that I'm here, I may put some other back doors in. I may load multiple cases of the ransomware. I may put it in different locations. That in the event that you're able to catch one and eradicate it, but you've not cleaned the other one, I may relaunch the malware as a bad actor again, simply because you didn't completely sanitize the network. So getting it completely sanitized, ensuring there's no traces there, is a big part of eradication. It's not just the one, it's the whole virus that's there. It's every piece of it. We've seen attacks, and right now in the industry, the average amount of time a bad actor is in a space before they pull a trigger, with some exceptions around 0 day and things like that. Um, they've been in for 4 years, I think, on average right now. We've seen some even longer than that, where the bad actor was in the environment, creating havoc, collecting information before they finally pulled the trigger on whether it was a large exfiltration of data, or in many cases simply launching ransomware to get paid. But having a team of folks go through that eradication is absolutely, even if you're a small organization, especially if you're a small organization, you want to get some help with that. If you're a large organization, getting multiple layers, I tell people, data breach and security is kind of like a person going to the North Pole. The closer you get, you're going to want more layers, right? The closer you get to the cold, you want more layers. Well, the more data you're using, the more it's interconnected, the more layers you want in terms of validation, oversight, and security. And that's the same thing with a breach response, that eradication. You'll want more than one person or team saying, hey, we think it's gone. You're going to get a second opinion. You're going to go through several filters to get that completely cleaned and sanitized. And then, of course, some of the most expensive part of this is going to be the recovery. And I say restoring systems and restoring infrastructure, because in some cases, especially if you choose to, you're not going to pay a ransom if it's a ransom situation. You have basically a very expensive brick in your data center, or in some cases you have a third party who has an expensive brick that you're paying for in their data center. In any event, you're going to have to build that from the ground up. This goes back to the eradication. Make sure that when you build it, all the pieces that touch it are also sanitized, and otherwise you're going to rebuild it again, because it's just going to get compromised again. So it's really a collaborative, integrated effort that's going on there. It's not a single lane that's happening. And then the last piece of the recovery is the validation. As an auditor, as an IT auditor, I've done countless data integrity audits and countless disaster recovery and backup recovery audits. And I'm going to tell you, I don't think you should be in the backup business, right? Backing up is like breathing. You should absolutely, this is something that just happens. The business side of it, you should be in the recovery business. Because backing up the data is very important, but if you can't recover it, then backing up was expensive and a bit of a waste of time. I'll give you an example, and I'm not using this as a bad example. Or picking on anyone. This is a dear acquaintance. His name's Corey. Corey's public about this. He was kind enough to present his breach as a hospital CEO to a hospital organization through a panel. We had an insurance underwriter, we had the CEO, and myself, and we were going through this CEO's experience with a recent breach. And there was a lot of things that we're talking about here that we also talked about there. And one of the things that surprised a lot of folks in the audience was the extended time it took to turn certain systems back up. There were some that came up fairly quickly, right? The email system, ERP, and things. They had recently upgraded those, and things were getting them back on. But I asked him, what was the longest pole in the tent? What did it? He said, well, the PAC system. Believe it or not, it was really the PAC system that took so long. I said, well, tell us about that. What they experienced was, and before I go any further, let me tell you who this was a great example of a hospital doing it right. So Corey and his team, for the last couple of years, on a monthly basis, ran tabletop exercises. They ensured their controls were in place. They were doing risk analysis and mitigation, maturity model. They had, if there was an example of someone doing it right, it was this hospital. They were doing a great job. They were prepared. So their incident response plan was immediate. It kicked in. The insurance company came in. It cost a lot of money, and I'll share that with you in a minute. But in that conversation, I said, well, what was the long pole in the tent? He said, well, 6 months it took PACS to get up. So for 6 months, we didn't have a PAC system, right? And I had him take us through that. What they discovered was, even though they had a backup of the PACS, because the entire system had been compromised, they tried to install the original application. Well, it wouldn't go on the hardware and things that were there. It was a legacy system. They had to go back multiple versions and even find people within the vendor that knew how to run the old. So they had to build an old system and then patch it, update it, restore a system, and then restore a system just to get it to a platform that they could put their then restore on so they could get it back up. It took quite a while. The vendor was scratching their head. We're not sure how to do this. We got to search the country to find somebody that's old enough, like Barry, that understands the old system. So exploring that in your environment, right, is a big step in the right direction if you at least understand how to restore your systems, and you're testing those, because that was one of the most common audit findings I would have for backup recovery business contingency, was that nobody was really testing the recovery. They would say, well, we have to recover things all the time, so we understand how to use the software in the system. I said, yeah, but what about these other critical systems? What about your infection control system, your PAC system? What about your nuclear radio? All of these systems that you're depending on, are they still able to get that restore in the same time frame as the rest of it? So, because again, if the whole system's not back up, chances are you can't cross the bridge because part of it's missing, and it impacts your patients, your revenue, and the entire system. So being able to ensure you're going to recover is key, because that's the last step once you've had that breach, is getting that recovery done. So moving along, let's talk a little bit about some of the containment. We've already talked about the incident response plan, isolating affected systems. That's the zero trust that we talked about. The third one, notifying internal stakeholders. So here's key: communication during an incident should be part of your incident response plan. There should be an incident response plan. There should be a communication protocol, plan, tree, model, whatever you want to call it. There should be clear indication on the people that are involved, who gets notified, what the message is, right? And I'm going to put right at the top of that, you should have legal right at the top of that, right? So I would not be having conversations around a potential breach unless I had my legal in that conversation. Why is that? Because there are many states that allow civil lawsuits for breaches. And under discovery, if you can keep it under attorney-client privilege, you're going to want to do that. So having legal involved in the early on, having legal that understands breach notification and response, either as co-counsel or primary, is also key. But notifying other stakeholders, it doesn't necessarily mean that, hey guys, we've had a breach. And again, one of the most the worst example of this was someone who sent out a notice to everybody, we've had a breach, make sure you're doing this, not doing this. And because they had already said in their emails, hey, we've had a breach, they couldn't claw that back. It's like, well, we didn't really have a breach. We had a near miss, but it wasn't really a breach. Make sure you're being diligent. So make sure you clearly understand who the stakeholders are. That's part of that incident response plan and part of your breach notification across and get some help. Get professionals either ahead of time. Personally, I like having them already canned, ready to use, and that is having a firm that can put out clear messaging on how to contain the message, but yet still share the severity of what's going on without creating panic in the organization. There's a skill in that. It's a bit of an art. So just an email to everybody may not be the best option. So spend some time on how do we notify internal stakeholders on this, not necessarily just a blanket email. And then, of course, engaging the cybersecurity experts. A lot of those are going to come from your insurance companies. If not, again, I like doing this ahead of time. This is tough to do when your back's against the wall and you make different decisions when you're trying to get out of the ransomware situation or you're in the throes of everything that's going on. Do it ahead of time. Get engaged. Call it a retainer if you want to. Get to know you're going to use in terms of a cybersecurity for the eradication and maybe the rebuild. And so that they at least understand your environment that's going on. They understand the people, they know what they're dealing with. Learning that on the fly can be, one, very expensive, and two, can take a lot more time than it needs to. And then absolutely preserve the forensic evidence there. So there's a process by which you can pull log files in. So again, there's a lot of states with civil lawsuits. So besides the federal investigation that is going to happen, whether it's a desk audit, you're sending in all your policy procedures and log files, or it's an on-site investigation, it's going to happen. If you've had a breach, somebody, you're going to have to report that. They're going to come in and want to look around and see, one, were you doing what you're supposed to, and how did you respond? So providing or preserving rather those files, where they're log files in some cases, the original message that comes in, and again, understanding what that is, getting legal involved early. By the way, I'm not a lawyer. None of this is legal advice, so don't go back. So Barry said legally we had to do this. Nope, that's not the case. I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm giving you advice from experience as a consultant to help you navigate this. Get your attorneys involved. It's extremely, extremely important. And then if you have to, those downtime procedures. We've been doing downtime procedures forever for everyone who's had accreditation, regardless of what the body is, whether it's Joint Commission or others. You've got practice downtime procedures. But look at within your organization how systems are connected to others, right? For example, going back to the Change Healthcare, do you have multiple eggs in the same basket, right? So that in a contingency, we thought we were going to have to do this manually, but we never knew we were going to have to do this manually at the same time, and it's two different processes. Explore some of those in your tabletop exercises. Again, tabletop is simply getting the stakeholders around a table and talking about if this happens to us. Okay, so here's a scary Barry tip 2 for the day, I suppose. In your tabletop exercises, quit making up weird scenarios that likely would never occur. And I've been a victim of that myself, and they're interesting to do. The best place that you can get your tabletop exercises are historically from, there's enough that's going on out there. You can look at every HIPAA breach that's happened, every ransomware that's happened. If it had to be publicly reported, meaning if it's over 500 impacted individuals, it had to be reported to OCR anyway. Those get posted once it's been settled, and you can read the details. And there's a lot of other consultants like mine who have websites that even go further to talk about the details on how it could have happened. Pull one of those, look at your organization and say, let's go look exactly what happened to hospital X, and let's pull that into our tabletop and say, if that happened to us, what would we do? That's one of the best things you can do for a tabletop. Look at what happened to the other person. Pull it in. Can this happen to us? If it happened to us, how would we react? Now, again, IT, it's our job to help protect. It is a natural response. And don't blame them for this, because it is a natural response to say, well, that can never happen because we have this, and we have this, and we have this. I get that, right? But still test it anyway. Bring those scenarios in to see and discuss. You will discover how some of your workflows and processes are interconnected that you maybe didn't understand or weren't aware of. Okay, so try that out. So if you had to go to the manual processes, at least have those tested, as well as your virtual and your electronic is tested. You guys have done polling question number 1, right? So we can run on through that. Hope everybody got it right. Did everybody get the right answer there? Can we give is there a number there we can say that most people got it? Oh, there's what we were looking for. You knew what I was saying. Look at that. Very good. Yeah, I'd say looks like most everybody got it right. Okay, very good. Very good. All right, moving right along. So as part of the eradication, the investigation, let's talk really quickly about the investigation. The forensic analysis, back in the day, forensic analysis was just some people looking at log files. There are experts in forensic analysis when it comes to cyber breaches, and you should really seek some of that kind of assistance. One, they help preserve it so that if it has to be used under discovery, under a civil lawsuit, it can still be used as that. Number 2, the interpretation of that is very critical. You need somebody who understands how to read those sort of things. And by the way, AI is helping all of us. So this is an area, AI is kind of a double-edged sword. I think I wrote that article and spoke on that before. But there's a lot of AI that can help us with the forensic analysis, and we depend on that. So make sure that you're working with firms who want to at least understand how to use that and are leveraging it towards the analysis. Identify the affected individual date. This is for those of you who do work with your attorneys and you have been through a breach, this is a big part of it. Thanks to the omnibus rule changes, we have a period of time to determine, one, who was affected, if they were affected, how they were affected, the number that were affected, and in some cases, whether it was a breach or not, right? Maybe we got an infiltration, but not an exfiltration of data. But at some point, if we did have an exfiltration of data, we're going to have to answer to the federal authorities, hey, how many people were infected or impacted by this? So in that case, that's just part of the assessment and the eradication. And then look at the regulatory implications. In some cases, for certain states, you may have specific things you have to do within that state that's even kind of beyond what your HIPAA notifications are. Is it a breach for credit card information? Are there PCI controls or payment card industry things that you have to notify as well? Was behavioral health information part of that? Because there's likely some regulatory things there. Again, having your attorneys who understand all that involved is very, very critical, so you understand exactly when you have to notify, who you have to notify. And then understand this. This is not days and weeks. Even though it says weeks and months, just forget the weeks. It's months of work. Going back to my dear acquaintance there in a particular Midwest state who had the breach, best case scenario, he said, we didn't drop a bill for 60 days. And this is somebody, again, who rehearsed this on a monthly basis for 2 years. He said, we didn't drop a bill for 60 days. Good news is we had enough cash on hand to continue to operate and make that work, but it was still very, very challenging. So it is months likely that you're going to experience this, and in some cases, the bell's going to continue to ring because, again, there's states that allow for civil lawsuits. There'll be e-discovery amongst those. Again, so all of that coming into fact, you need to be prepared for quite a ride if you actually do have a breach situation where it's the ransomware, which you have to report a breach, or an actual exfiltration of data, whether it's accidental. In some cases, we have those where, oops, I accidentally sent this information to a lot of people that it really didn't belong to, so we have to report that. Or if it's a victim of an attack, in all those cases, it's going to take a while to get through, so get used to that. The legal obligations, we talked about having legal, you'll hear me say that all through this, make sure the attorneys are there. You're going to have to notify the patients. In some cases, that can be very costly. because there's the initial notification, and whether you're combining that with, oh, by the way, I have to give you freecreditreport.com or whatever flavor that you're using. By the way, only about 10% of people, the studies show about 10% of the people will actually use that free credit report in those cases, and which is a sad thing because in our environment today across the country, breach is such a common thing, whether it's from the department store, maybe even healthcare or others, that we used to seeing these letters, uh, and it's people just laugh. I'll let it go. It's fine. I got another one of these things. Scary Berry tip number 3 for today. That is now also a tool that bad actors are using. Yes. So if you get a letter that says, hey, you've been breached, click here to get free access to the following, or find out if your data was compromised. It's going to that website and clicking that's actually the payload that's going to compromise you. The bad actors have actually figured out that the environment that's happening so often, they get your information by pretending to be somebody that's had a breach. So if you do get a letter that says you've had your data was compromised, or an email, outside of that email, don't click anything in the email, because let's face it, if this insurance company or this department store or this airline had a breach and they're giving you access, you can probably go to their website and find the information about that well and get to the same data. Do it that way. Do it organically. Don't bite on, hey, I'm going to cut and paste this, or I'm going to click this, because it is now a hook that bad actors are using. So there's a free security tip for you there. Notifying the regulatory bodies. Again, your lawyers are going to help you determine who that is. If you don't have in-house counsel that knows that, I recommend, if you're a compliance officer and you're listening to this, don't take that on by yourself. Get outside counsel to help you make sure that you're notifying all the ones, not just the clear ones, which is OCR in most cases for a HIPAA breach. And then, of course, if it's over 500, not only are you absolutely going to notify OCR and the Office for Civil Rights and under Health and Human Services, but you're also going to notify 3 news agencies. Your name's going to be in the paper, and trying to recover some of that credibility could be expensive. And we'll touch that in just a moment. And then at least make sure that you're compliant with other things. So you're going to go through at least a desk audit. So in the audit world, a desk audit is, you're going to get a letter that says, hey, you're being audited for this. You need to go to this site. And you're going to get an ID. You're going to get a portal, and they're going to start uploading documents. Upload 6 years or 7 years worth of your HIPAA security risk analysis. Upload your incident response plan. Upload your security plan. Upload all these things. And then somebody on the other end may review that. They may choose to come on site and do interviews as well, but at the very least, you're going to get a desk audit. My thing is, make sure you can at least pass that desk audit. You don't have to wait to that point. In your tabletop or do an exercise, assume you have to go through a desk audit. Can you upload an inventory of all your devices with a clear risk matrix on where the data is, whether or not it has EPHI in it, how you're protecting it, and risk scoring that? If you can't do that, then likely that starts you off in a bad foot with a desk audit. So, at least make sure you can be compliant if they say, hey, are you compliant with this? Because granted, there's going to be situations where you absolutely can't prevent the breach, but at least be able to pass that desk audit, get yourself started on the right foot and from the compliance standpoint. Moving right along, we have polling question number 2. Go ahead.
All right. Our second question is, which federal agency must be notified if a breach affects more than 500 individuals in a healthcare organization? FDA, ONC, the OCR, FBI, or CMS? Remember, you must fill out the polling questions to receive CPE credit.
I can see who are compliance officers for sure, because there's a little bit of a, yeah. All right, the lines have stopped moving.
Thank you for participating in our poll. Back to Barry.
Yeah, very good. So the answer I was looking for, I kind of gave in the presentation, is Office of Civil Rights, right? But I can see there's some compliance officers, because you're also clicking CMS. There's some notification requirements there as well. Yes, indeed. But the answer we're looking for there, based on what it says, look, yes, you're going to notify, and this comes from the HIPAA side of the house, right? And that is in a breach notification. If it's over 500 patients, you must notify OCR. And again, the omnibus rule that came out around 2013, gives us the ability to conduct the investigation to determine if it was us, if it was our third party, if there really was a breach, how many people. But at some point, if we know it's over 500, we're going to have to go ahead and submit that notification to the Office for Civil Rights that we've had a breach. And then that starts this whole ball turning that we've been talking about. Okay. Next, recovery and restoration. We talked about, up front. I spent some time talking about you should be in the act of recovering, not necessarily the act of backing up. Now, my caveat there: don't say that Barry said you don't have to back up anything. That's not what I said, right? Backing up is something that you ought to be doing like you're breathing, right? Absolutely, you ought to be backing up. But in terms of testing and training, the business side of it, you really should be in the recovery business. So could you rebuild that IT infrastructure? Specifically, if you're outsourcing everything to the cloud, you're in some kind of cloud. What does that relationship look like? If you turn to your cloud provider and said, I need to stand up a new server today, how many hoops are you going to have to jump through to get that server up? Or could you actually get it stood up very quickly? Right? Because if you're relying on that third party and you have to do what we call bare metal build, meaning it's just like the thing never existed, we got to build it from scratch and then overlay, put our data back on it from a restore. Could you do that? Right? And then, of course, it's the restore from the backups. Testing those are pretty important. And then monitoring systems for threats as part of the restoration. As you're starting to restore, I actually had a client years ago, they restored their quarantine server. What's a quarantine server? Every time you get a virus, it puts it in the quarantine server. I don't know why we collect viruses, but as an industry, we quarantine things. I would say don't quarantine it, burn it, get rid of it. But they actually restored their quarantine server. So their antivirus was just going off like a Christmas tree because they restored the server. So at least monitor your systems as you're doing the restore to make sure you're not putting viruses back in space. And then, of course, obviously, you're going to monitor going forward. And then provide support for your patients. So everything we're doing brings it all back home. Everything we're doing is to be able to provide care for our patients. That's our industry, right? So while this is going on and this fog is going on, there should be a group of folks as part of your recovery that are helping your patients and your providers get access to data, because that patient is still sick. That patient still needs a surgery. That patient still needs to be seen, right? So make sure that's part of your plan, that from a contingency while this is going on, that you're paying attention to that, because at the very least, you're going to cost you money, you're going to be down, but the patients being impacted is the most horrible part of it as far as I'm concerned. And then balance your speed and caution. So you have to get up really quick, but I've seen people who come up too quick. And again, they come up and they go right back down because they didn't do the sanitation part. They didn't get the right people involved from a forensic standpoint. And all of a sudden they're ransomed again, sort of thing. So make sure that you're balancing the speed of your recovery with caution, so you're doing it in the right way. There's an old saying in the military, right? Slow is smooth is fast. Right. So take your time, get the pieces in there, get it up right, so you don't have to redo it again, because that's going to exacerbate the situation. Financial impact across the country today. I told you, my friend, I keep using Corey as an example out there. At the end of that panel discussion, I said, so Corey, share or not share, how much did this cost you? And at the time, the average across the country for a breach was being reported as about $11 million just to recover from it if you're a small or rural organization. And he said right around 11 or $12 million. I said, very good. So that's a good indicator that what we're monitoring in terms of metric in the industry is pretty spot on. But now that doesn't include, right, any fines that may come after that, right? So you may be $11 million plus a $5.4 million fine. But right now, somewhere between 11 and 13 million, take it to the bank. That's what it's going to cost you with third-party vendors, forensics, lawyers, and everything else to recover from a breach. That's how important it is to try not to have that breach. And you want to make sure your cyber insurance company, that you at least got that kind of coverage, and then you're doing all the things you're supposed to, so they pay on it. And then reputational impact. This is one that's can be the largest financial impact of the whole thing. How are you going to get your reputation back? How do you get, especially if you're in a competitive market? Now, if you're a hospital, like I have a client, a dear friend that's at the edge of Death Valley, there's not a lot of hospitals out there. So, recovery is not that big a deal. But if you're in an urban area and you've got a lot of competition, just the scare of somebody's data going somewhere can push people into other organizations. Or because you weren't prepared in the contingency, maybe they had to have their surgery. Well, they liked having their surgery over there, and they're going to do that going forward. So getting your reputational and your operational impact, getting things back in good disruption, that's a big piece of it, right? So you're going to experience that. Make that part of your planning and your testing. As your tabletops, those to me are some of the most important things to talk about. Not how does the IT folks get rid of the virus, but how do we recover from this? How do we keep the bleeding from completely draining us? How do we get our reputation back? And look for experts. And I realize I'm a professional services expert and I enjoy helping people. And yes, we charge for it. That's how we make a living. But we really can't help, especially when it comes to public relations, when it comes to operational impact contingencies. There are lots of professionals in the industries that can help you. So reach out to those if you have to and when you can, as soon as you can. Long-term reforms that we're talking about, invest in effective cybersecurity training. Now, what does that mean? Let's try and get away from, hey, you need to watch this PowerPoint and at the end of it sign off that you watched it. Try to do some things, mix it up a bit. I like involving people. I've got, in fact, we help clients do this. I got a dear friend, and I mean that not an acquaintance. He's a dear friend. His name's Scott Agenbaum. He's retired special agent charged cybersecurity for the FBI, and he does videos around this. If you put his name out there, you'll see all kinds of things in YouTube and videos. And we work with Scott. He creates customized videos for us for some of our clients, and it keeps people interested in the content. And we talk about things that maybe others don't. And I've seen some tired old PowerPoint presentations. Look, don't focus on we have education. Focus on the effectiveness of the education. Having the education may check the box so you pass a desk audit, but the effectiveness of the communication may keep you from having to have the audit period, right? So focus on that. And then patching and upgrade systems. I'm on board with the IT folks there. So when they tell you, hey, look, it's an inconvenience, but we got to patch it. Patching and update systems are one of those top 3 things you can do to prevent a breach, or certainly prevent a horizontal impact of that breach. And then zero trust architecture. I won't go back into that again, but I will emphasize, if you don't know what zero trust architecture is, grab Chat GPT or Microsoft Copilot or what you're using and say, what is zero trust environment? You're going to find it's a methodology, it's an idea, it's a mindset. It's not a tool. It's how things come together to make sure you're re-authentication folks. So again, that can stop the horizontal movement once you do have some type of an attack. And then look, regular audits. It's no longer okay to do it once a year. It should be a continuous process that you're continually monitoring and you're auditing as you go, and you're looking at the maturity levels of the controls. There's a thing that OCR will spit back at you if you have an investigation and they're seeing the same kind of thing pop up on the last 3 or 4 of your security risk analysis, and they'll ding you on it. It's called systemic noncompliance. It means that not only, and you can give all the reasons in the world, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough people, we don't have enough time. So sorry, you're in business, you have a requirement to do this. As systemically, you've not done it, so they're going to say systemic noncompliance, and that's just another thing they're going to hammer you with. So try to avoid that by conducting regular audits, making sure that the mitigation is there. You don't have to break the bank for some of the mitigation, but you need to be addressing some of those things that are high impact for security. That's going to help you in the event that you have a breach, being able to show the clear example of that. And we're just about done. We got maybe a couple more slides to go. But the clearest example of that was the breach that occurred at MD Anderson a while back. Chris Belmont was the CIO there, and I was Chris's CTO for Ochsner for a while. And in that case, I can tell you, I mean, I have personal direct knowledge from that man and his team. They do a great job of protecting data at MD Anderson, a great job, okay? But yet they had a couple of devices. They had a thumb drive that was left on a public transit system. They had a lost laptop, and they got hit with a massive fine, right? Nearing $10 million, $8 point something million. And if there's ever a clear indication that they were doing everything they could, but they still, look, we can spend a lot of money, but occasionally you just hire idiots, right? It happens, they get through and they click on things. It just happens. So they appealed this. So I think MD Anderson, I think Chris Belmont, I think that whole team at MD Anderson did our industry a huge favor. They didn't simply say okay and move forward. That it wasn't that it was going to bankrupt them. They could afford that, but they said that's not right because we were really trying hard. So they appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court's appellate court, and they won the appeal. And the court basically kind of got on to OCR and said, hey, when you levied this fine, you didn't take into consideration all the things that they were doing right. You just focused on the impact of the patients and they failed, right? So that was overturned and they settled for a fraction of the original fine. And that set a precedence. And here's the precedence. If you can show, right, through an investigation that you've done the correct things and you're monitoring things, you're going to have a better position of defense, not only in a civil lawsuit, but certainly passing a federal investigation. But if you're not, Lord heaven be with you, because there's enough precedents out there and there should be no excuses. So make sure that's going to help you survive the impact afterwards, making sure you can at least pass that desk audit. I know we've talked about chief information security officers, and now I'm saying even small organizations, you should have a chief information security officer, right? I'm not saying you have to pay them what a 10 hospital IDN pays them, but you should have somebody who's living every day they get up in the morning, they're talking about security at your organization. Uh, and I would call them a chief information security officer, or at least an information security officer, or an executive director of information security. Give them the elevated access they need so that they can commingle with their colleagues and network and share things. And you need somebody focused on that in your organization. And then multi-factor authentication. I threw that near the end because that is the unpardonable sin in these days. If you're not using multi-factor authentication, and I don't just mean for your email or just to get into your domain. I mean, multi-factor throughout the organization using zero trust. That is your biggest exposure in my experience. That multi-factor, there are tons of breaches that have been avoided simply because the bad actor was able to get credentials through a phishing campaign, but were shut down cold simply because they couldn't produce that second factor, right? And they were able to get identified and cleared out and better. If you're not doing multi-factor authentication, you need to do that, please. There's Scary Berry tip number 4 today. Absolutely, multi-factor authentication is going to help you in the long run of this. Okay. Polling question number 3.
Our third question is, why is it critical to preserve logs and forensic data after a healthcare cyber breach? To improve hospital marketing, to prevent public panic, to assist legal investigations and identify the breach source, to create training videos, or to update employee profiles. Remember, you must fill out the polling questions to receive CPE credit.
Oh, you're knocking this one out of the park. Very good.
All right. Thank you for participating in our poll. Now back to Barry.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. To assist in the legal investigations and identity of the breach source. It helps in a lot of different ways. One, you have a breach notification requirement. Having that information is going to help quickly identify and clearly identify so that maybe you don't have to err on the side of caution and say, well, maybe it is 14 million instead. No. With clear logs, you can say it was exactly this. This is what was breached. Here's what was exfiltrated. Number 2, if you were to ask my friend Scott with the FBI, Scott Agelbaum, hey, one, is the FBI going to show up at your door and make all this better? The answer is no. Let me just pop that bubble right there. One, they've got a ton of stuff going on. They're really focused on bringing the bad actors down, not necessarily recovering the dollars that you've lost. But the FBI is a different face agency than it used to be years ago. They will absolutely help if they can. You get a hold of them soon enough, and you have the data they need, they could potentially help in at least in the instance of, is it really a breach? Who's the bad actor? What's going on? But he said the most common mistake that they see is they'll show up to the client, or in this case, the victim for an FBI. They'll show up to the victim and say, "Hey, we need this information." The victim says, "Yeah, we don't have that. We're not really we don't collect that kind of information. It's we've been meaning to do that. We were talking about turning on." So, without a doubt, make sure that within your tabletop exercises you can explore: are we collecting the right kind of forensic information and holding it the right way to be used for several things. We're at the end. I only got about 2 minutes. I'm getting the 2-minute warning here. I think it's on. Yep, that's me. That's not y'all. I've got my little 2-minute warning. Rebuilding the trust is one of these things that you're going to experience at the end of a breach. Having a public relations company alongside of you to handle the message going out is a big impact to this. So it's hard enough to go through a breach. It's hard enough to try to rebuild your trust. but it is double hard if the messaging going out at the beginning of the breach is the wrong messaging, or it lands the wrong way. It can make this rebuilding the trust tougher. The number one thing for me is the transparent communication. That's what we've seen work the best. I have personally seen clients try to kind of spin it and it come back and bite them. So I think if you have to report the breach, transparent communication is required. That's there. But even with your staff, transparent on what caused it, how to prevent it, visible security improvements, you're going to be able to show to anybody who's interested, whether it's an investigative or even patients, that we have improved this, and putting that into your communications, part of rebuilding your trust. Commitment to privacy, just recommitting to, hey, look, in part of that communication, most of us have the patient's privacy and rights that are out there in the patient's bill of rights. Having that up front as part of your communication, reminding the patients, look, this has happened, letting the patients know this is exactly what happened. We try to prevent it. We have all these things going on, but communicating with your community, your patients, that, hey, this is what happened, but we're still here. We're still protecting the data. It's a tough thing to do. So get ready for that. But having a professional along your side as a PR firm, I think, will help you. And it's going to be tough to regain the confidence in some cases, especially if you're in a multi-facility market where you've got a lot of competition. It may take a while to do that. So when you're looking at your cyber insurance, you may want to check there's enough money to kind of cover that gap as well. So listen, we're to the end of the presentation. I want to say thank you. For one, apologies for the technology at the front. That's all on me, or at least the hotel that I'm in. It's fortunate that I'm an IT guy that I could fix that myself real quickly. And love my iPhone and my hotspot. Thank you for other iPhone users. You understand it. It saved the day for me by no short of the imagination. So thanks again for your attention. We hope you've enjoyed this. It is our pleasure to present these. My name is Barry Mathis with PYA. I lead our IT advisory and consulting. If I can help you ever in any way, please reach out to me. I would be happy to do so.
Thanks to Barry Mathis and all of our presenters. If you have any questions, their presentations and contact information will be emailed to you along with a recording of today's event. Also, if PYA can provide assistance with audit, tax, compliance, valuation, or transaction services, please call or email us. You may also visit our website at pyapc.com for more details about our specific areas of expertise, or to subscribe and to receive PYA's insights. Please remember to stay on the line once the webinar disconnects to complete the short survey for CPE credit. Your CPE certificates are downloadable via the CPE pane and will also be sent via email. Now I'll hand it over to Catherine to close us out.
Thank you, Jennifer. And on behalf of PYA, thank you for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed this year's Summer CPE Symposium. If you'd like to rewatch any of the symposium webinars, they're available on our website, as well as a link to subscribe to any future PYA webinars that may be useful to you. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.